The jungle breathed humidity like a sleeping giant, heat rising from the soil in slow, suffocating waves. Vines clung to trees like desperate hands. Cicadas pulsed their metallic warnings through the air. Leaves dripped with water that had fallen days ago but refused to dry. In this world of constant growth, constant hunger, constant watchfulness, a tiger moved. He stepped soundlessly over fallen palm fronds, each paw placed with the precision of a lifetime spent mastering silence. His muscles rippled beneath orange and black fur, stripes designed by evolution to cut him into pieces against the undergrowth. A living shadow. His whiskers twitched, his nose wrinkled. A scent trailed through the hot air. Deer. Not weak, not child, but injured. Worth chasing. Worth the energy. His stomach tightened at the thought. He had eaten little in recent days. Prey had grown scarce. Too many outsiders had pushed deeper into the forest. Trucks, axes, gunshots. Everything ran farther. Everything learned fear. Even the plants seemed nervous. He crept closer. Up ahead, a clearing. A small pond where the water had stilled into perfect, mirror-like calm. A fragile piece of silence in a loud, living world. The deer stood at the edge, trembling, one rear leg bloodied. It drank shallowly, jerking its head up every few seconds, eyes wide and shining with instinct's dread. The tiger lowered himself into the grass, his body flattened into the earth. His heartbeat slowed deliberately. Patience was his deadliest muscle. The deer turned, exposing throat and confusion. He surged forward. The jungle exploded, a flash of teeth, a desperate leap, the impact of predator against prey. The struggle lasted only as long as fear clings to a body fighting what it already understands. The deer fell still. Breath escaped into the air one final time. The tiger fed, tearing flesh carefully. He didn't gorge. He ate to live, not to waste. As he finished, he stepped toward the pond to drink. Moonlight slid through a slit in the canopy, glinting faintly off the water's surface. He leaned over the still lake, and the jungle looked back. His reflection was not just a tiger's face, but a question. How much longer would he rule here? The water rippled, disturbed by a breeze that smelled wrong. Gasoline, oil, the iron scent of a human camp. He raised his head sharply, ears forward. A metallic click echoed faintly, a trap being primed. Then voices low and careless. He's close. Tracks fresh. We get him tonight. Humans. Poachers didn't need hunger to kill. They killed for money, for trophies, for thrills. The tiger melted back into the undergrowth, leaving only paw prints that steam and moonlight would soon erase. He moved silently along the edge of the water, body tense, muscles coiled for retreat or attack, depending on fate's next demand. He did not fear them. Fear belongs to prey, but he respected the strange power they carried. As he slipped deeper into the dark, the jungle listened and held its breath. Even the frogs quieted. Shadows bent around him as if hoping to keep him safe a little longer. Because when a tiger vanishes, the jungle loses more than a predator. It loses its identity, its law, its heartbeat. And tonight the tiger walked away, not as a hunter who had fed, but as a king, defending a kingdom that dared to tremble. Night in the jungle should have been a symphony. Tree frogs chattering in hidden puddles, insects vibrating their wings into electric harmonies, monkeys arguing in the canopy. But tonight, sound withdrew into the leaves, swallowed by something heavier than darkness. The tiger walked with shoulders rolling like a slow earthquake beneath his fur. Each step placed cautiously, not from uncertainty, but from knowing what hunted him. The scent of humans had become stronger. Smoke threaded through the trees, thin and gray, too intentional to be mistaken for lightning-struck wood. Dogs barked in short, sharp bursts, the kind of dogs that didn't fear big cats because steel gave them misplaced courage. He stopped near a fallen tree, pressing his body against its rough bark, blending into stripes of shadow. His ears flicked forward, parsing the sounds. Footsteps. Multiple. Breaking twigs with confidence. Humans rarely respected the silence of the wild. A beam of light sliced through the black, a flashlight sweeping slow arcs. The tiger narrowed his eyes, measuring distance. There were 3 men, boots caked in mud, rifles carried too casually. One rested a cigarette between his fingers, burning a trail of orange in the dark. The tiger could smell the nicotine from here, bitter and thick. "We're close. His kill is back that way," one whispered, pointing toward the hidden remains of the deer. Another laughed under his breath. "Big male. Stripes clear as day. Saw them in the mud. Boss says they pay triple for a tiger hide this size." The third man slapped the dog's flank, the animal snorting, nose low to the ground. "Good boy. Find him." The tiger's muscles tensed, ready to spring if the jungle gave him no other choice, but something else sharpened his attention. A new sound muffled behind the others. A gasp. Human. Smaller. Afraid. The tiger shifted slightly and caught sight of a fourth figure. A young boy, barely old enough to be considered danger. He clutched his father's sleeve, eyes wide and reflecting panic with every flicker of the flashlight. "I don't like this," the boy whispered. "We shouldn't be here." "No talking," the man hissed back, shoving him behind. The jungle, ancient and alive, did not care who deserved what, but the tiger recognized fear that came from innocence rather than cruelty. The boy was not a threat. He was a warning. The tiger slid deeper into the brush, body pressed low, whiskers brushing leaves. He circled wide, passing silently behind the hunters. He could vanish. He could run. The jungle still had places where man's arrogance hadn't left footprints. But he didn't run. Not while humans dragged gunfire into a territory built on fangs and balance. The dog suddenly stiffened. It lifted its head, nostrils flaring, then barked once, loud and sharp. The flashlight swung wildly toward the sound. 3 rifles followed. Before the dog could lunge, the tiger moved. Not toward the dog, that would be predictable, but straight across the opening toward the direction of their camp. A roar split the forest, not long or dramatic, just enough to slice terror into the men's spines. Shouts erupted. 2 guns fired blindly into the bush. Birds exploded upward from trees in white-winged panic. The boy stumbled and fell backward into the vines. "Get the light! Get the light! Where is he?" Silence. By the time they regained sense, the tiger was gone, footsteps erased by moss and moonlight. But he hadn't fled far. He watched from the deeper dark as confusion knotted the hunters together like trapped animals. Fear would slow them. Fear would make them clumsy. Fear made humans remember their place. Late guests in an older world. The tiger turned away only when the jungle began to breathe again. He padded toward the lake, his reflection waiting for him once more. Moonlight trembled on the water as though it, too, now feared to be still. He lowered his head to drink. For the briefest moment, the lake showed him not his own face, but a cub's. Small, fragile, eyes bright with the uncomplicated trust of new life. Memory struck him like claws. He had once guarded such life. He had once shared his territory, his hunt, his roar with family. Then came the dry season, the drought, the river shrinking into mud. His mate weakened, the cub's breath growing weaker too. He hunted farther and farther, but the guns reached her first. A snare hidden under leaves. A scream, fur stained in dust and blood. A silence that taught him hatred. He pulled back from the lake, fur bristling though no threat crept close. The jungle mirrored him perfectly. Beautiful, powerful, and always one step from loss. Tonight, the hunters learned fear. Tomorrow they might learn sorrow. And the tiger, who the lake had dared show a ghost, faded into the trees like a verdict the jungle would soon enforce. Dawn arrived tired, as though even the sun doubted it had the strength to climb above the canopy. Mist clung to the ground in long, pale ribbons, twisting around roots and boulders, like restless spirits caught between sleep and waking. The jungle's humidity thickened, turning every breath into a slow swallow. The tiger moved with hunger gnawing at his ribs again. His last kill had been enough to stop the ache, but not enough to restore strength. He needed another hunt soon, prey that gave more than just survival. His paws pressed into mud, softening under the newborn heat. Then, he smelled something that didn't belong. Not humans this time. Not their smoke or their guns. Milk. Fear. a heartbeat too frantic. A cub. The tiger froze, muscles seizing in a strange mixture of caution and curiosity. He followed the scent through reeds near a creek. Birds flapped from low branches, screeching disapproval, but the tiger continued, silent as the gliding fog. At the base of a fallen palm, he found her, a tigress, dead. Her body lay twisted, flank ripped open by a weapon that did not use claws or tooth. Flies already crawled at the edges of her wound. The jungle had not yet accepted her into its silence. Bullet holes do not rot cleanly. Beside her, pressed so close it looked like part of her stripe pattern, a small cub trembled, barely old enough to walk, eyes too large, fur too soft. It tried to growl, a tiny sound high and confused, but it was more plea than threat. Its mother's scent clung to it like fading protection. The tiger stared. This was not his blood, not his responsibility. But blood does not decide what a predator becomes. The jungle does. The cub nudged the lifeless flank gently, expecting warmth that did not return. A sharp whine slipped from its throat, and that sound, pure grief, pure need, pushed something deep inside the tiger that he had locked away since the day the snares took his own cub. He circled the scene, nose lowering to carefully inspect. There were boot prints in the mud. 2 different sizes. One adult, one smaller. The boy from last night had been here. The sharper imprint belonged to the man. The hunters had not wandered blindly. They had killed with intention. The tiger's tail lashed once, a mute roar held inside muscle and bone. The cub tried to stand, but its legs buckled. It collapsed into the mud with a soft, frustrated squeak. Its tiny heart rattled in its thin frame. The tiger turned away. He took 3 steps, stopped. The cub whimpered. He closed his eyes. The memory surged, a desperate search, frantic calls, the scent of his own child fading under the stink of rust and blood. He had found his cub too late. The jungle had watched him grieve in silence. He looked back. The little one stared up at him, helpless, but its gaze carried a simple, undeniable request. Do not leave me here. The tiger approached slowly, lowering his head until he could smell the cub's breath. Warm, fragile, faint. The cub reached forward and pressed its nose to his chest. Not dominance, not fear, instinct. The tiger did not know how to comfort. He only knew how to protect. And protection sometimes meant scarlet answers to violence. He gripped the cub gently by the scruff and lifted it, feeling the light weight against his jaws. The cub dangled silently, trusting. He stepped away from the dead tigress, leaving her to the vines and quiet. There would be no burial. The jungle recycles all pain into soil. As he carried the cub into thicker cover, the jungle seemed to lower its voice, granting passage. Myna birds stopped calling. Even monkeys watched without mocking. Protection had returned to the trees, but danger had not retreated. Somewhere beyond the green walls, men were awakening with plans. Rifles being cleaned, traps being reset, greed rehearsing. The cub whimpered again, and the tiger shifted it closer to his warmth. He had lost before. He would not lose again. Not while he still ruled teeth and shadow in the place where the jungle saw itself reflected. If hunters wanted a trophy, they would find claws instead. The morning heat thickened into something almost solid, pressing against every surface like a warning. The tiger moved deeper into the jungle, the cub hanging carefully from his jaws, its small body swinging lightly with each step. Every now and then he paused to let the cub rest in the shade of ferns, while he scanned the canopy and listened to what the forest dared not say aloud. The cub slept in brief fits, exhaustion pulling it under again and again. Hunger gnawed at its tiny belly. The tiger smelled the desperation in its breath. It would need meat, not scraps. Fresh kill, soon. He chose a path that led toward an old riverbed where prey often gathered before the rains claimed the dry soil. As he approached, he stopped abruptly. A sound prickled his ears. Engines, a metallic growl foreign to the rhythm of leaves and wind. He set the cub down and nudged it behind a moss-covered log. The cub obeyed, shrinking into shadow, instinct already shaping its bones into the silence of a hunter. The tiger crept forward, Through a lattice of vines, he saw them. A truck and two motorcycles parked between sal trees, their tires crushing roots without apology. Three men stood near a table of equipment, cameras, radios, a folded net, something that gleamed like steel jaws. Not villagers searching for firewood, not researchers with notebooks and caution. Poachers, comfortable enough to unpack their greed in daylight. A cage lay open, empty, baited with the scent of goat meat. A trap meant for something large, something striped, something worth more money dead than alive. One man unrolled a map onto the hood of the truck. The boy stood beside him again, pale, silent, unsteady. The man pointed to a spot marked in pen. Tracks everywhere here, fresh. He's dragging something heavy. Maybe a kill. Maybe a cub. The boy's jaw clenched, his eyes casting quickly toward the thicket, toward the tiger's position, though he couldn't possibly see him. His voice cracked just loud enough. "We're not supposed to kill cubs. They're protected. All tigers are." The man cut him off with a harsh laugh. "Protected? Out here? The only protection these beasts have is how hard they are to find. And luck runs out." The tiger's ears flattened. Breath deepened. The jungle held its tension alongside him. If anger were a physical force, vines would have snapped. The boy stepped back, fists trembling. "This isn't hunting, it's..." A rough hand gripped the back of his shirt, yanking him close. "You're here to learn, not to talk. You want to eat next season? You want your family safe? Then, you do what I say." Fear swallowed the rest of the boy's words. The tiger lowered further into the ferns, every instinct torn between striking now and waiting until the advantage sharpened fully. He was one predator against many weapons. A single mistake would drown the cub in the same fate as his mate. Instead of attack, he retreated. Quiet. Calculated. He returned to the log where the cub hid, whimpering softly. He nudged it once, reassurance, then picked it up and moved on. Away from engines, away from cages, toward territory thicker with green and older with memory. Hours passed. The jungle grew denser, sunlight splintering into fractals through towering roots and ancient branches. The cub nuzzled his neck once, needing nourishment he couldn't offer yet. He quickened his pace. A rustle overhead. Langur monkeys tracked their movement from the canopy, tails curling in agitation. They called out warnings, soft, nervous clicks, signaling a disturbance ahead that didn't involve teeth or guns. He descended into a shallow ravine. The air cooled, dampness clinging to his whiskers. Then the scent struck him. Another tiger. The ground vibrated with a low growl before the eyes appeared. Golden, predatory, full of territorial certainty. A large male stepped from the foliage across the ravine, shoulders thick, mane-like fur bristling along his spine. He was younger, heavier, and convinced the world owed him dominance. The cub mewled, quiet but undeniable. The rival's ears pricked, his lips curled. A cub meant a claim, a lineage, a challenge. The tiger set the cub gently on the ground, positioning his body like a barrier of muscle and rage. He had not intended to recruit conflict today, but conflict had found him anyway. The younger male advanced a single step. Leaves trembled. Birds scattered. The jungle leaned closer. The tiger lowered his head in warning, eyes locked on the intruders. There would be no negotiation here, not over this small, helpless life. The rival's tail flicked. The cub pressed itself against the tiger's leg. One silent heartbeat stretched into eternity. This was no longer a matter of hunger or territory. This was the moment the jungle decided who deserved to remain part of its reflection, and who would be erased from it. The younger male lunged first. No roar, no warning, only explosive muscle and sharpened certainty. His claws slashed for the throat, the place where jungle laws were finalized. The older tiger met him head-on, jaws snapping shut around the intruder's shoulder. Fur tore, flesh split. The metallic taste of blood sprayed into the leaves. They crashed together in a knot of stripes and fury, rolling across damp earth. The cub bolted into a hollow of roots, trembling so violently that soil shifted beneath its tiny paws. Its world had collapsed into noise and terror. Both tigers rose again instantly, as if gravity itself feared intervening. The younger one circled, snarling deep in his chest, saliva threading between his teeth. He was strong, reckless, and convinced that strength alone defined kingship. The older tiger stood lower, breath heavy, muscles exhausting 1 calorie at a time that hunger had barely given him. But his eyes burned with something that rebuilt strength faster than claws could tear it away. Memory. He remembered his mate's scream. He remembered finding his cub's tiny body. He remembered traps and gunpowder and the cold indifference of humans. He remembered loss, and loss had a way of turning survival into vengeance. The rival charged again. The older tiger pivoted sideways at the last heartbeat, his paw whipping across the other's face with a force that cracked bone. A roar ripped the canopy apart. The younger male stumbled, disoriented, but rage propped him upright. He dove low now, fangs aiming for the belly, the quickest way to end any dynasty. The older tiger reared up, weight slamming down. His foreleg pinned the younger's neck. Claws sank deep. A sudden silence cut through the struggle as the rival's breath stopped, trapped under the weight of a king who refused dethronement. For a moment, they froze like that, both panting, staring into each other's pupils as if each could see his own death in the other's eyes. The older tiger spoke first without sound. Not today. He released his grip just enough to let air return, but not dignity. The younger male thrashed once, snarled weakly, then turned away. Retreat wasn't defeat. It was survival. The jungle allowed second chances only when a predator admitted he was too young to bury the old. He limped into the brush, tail low, blood marking the trail of his humbled exit. When he disappeared, the world exhaled. Leaves shook off fear as if it were rain. Birds dared whisper again. The jungle hadn't chosen a new ruler today. It had reminded itself who already ruled. The older tiger stood over the ground where the fight had nearly decided everything. His sides heaved. A fresh gash bled along his flank, but he remained steady, gaze scanning for any threat that dared return. A tiny cry pulled him back from the war, still raging in his instincts. The cub crawled from the roots, fur matted by dirt and fear. It approached, uncertain if the monster that fought for it was the same creature who offered protection. The tiger lowered his head. The cub pressed against his leg, trembling until its breathing found rhythm again. He nudged it gently beneath his chest, shielding it from any gaze that might still lurk in the undergrowth. Above them, a distant sound, an engine starting. Men. The jungle shivered again. This time, not out of respect. The tiger looked toward the direction of the poachers' camp. The rival had been driven off for the cub's sake. Now a different rival, more cowardly, more relentless, awaited somewhere between greed and gunpowder. And the tiger knew hunger alone no longer fueled his heart. He carried the cub not by necessity, but by oath. He would not allow the jungle's reflection to show loss again, not while his roar could still keep silence away.